All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for having me here. So if you look down here, I'm not going to go through all 106 slides, just for the record. This is a lot of stuff here, so you're going to see me skimming through stuff and going rapidly through certain things. I want to make sure I drive certain important points home. And you're probably wondering, I thought it was ketogenic diet, insulin resistance. What is that? Intermittent fasting. These are all kind of interrelated. So I'm going to kind of touch upon everything, and we'll get to the keto part as well. So a little bit about myself. I graduated from Ohio State for medical school, went to UCLA for undergrad, and joined Rancho family here in 2005. So this is the reason why I'm so passionate about this, right? Back in 2018, which is a picture of me on the left there, I was about 45 pounds, probably heavier, maybe 50, 55 pounds heavier in fat. And at that time, I was snoring. I'm 50 right now, so I was 46 at the time. So I was snoring, waking up with headaches. Really didn't have a lot of energy when I came home at the end of the day, despite it being 6 or 7 o'clock. I was exhausted. And my wife said, hey, you better go get checked for sleep apnea. You're snoring, and you don't normally do that. And I'm waking up with headaches. And I said, no, I don't want to do that because, number one, I'm a husband, and we don't always listen as well as we should. And, but I knew that I didn't have this problem when I was thinner. So I kind of knew what the problem was. I needed to lose the weight. So at that point, I started really on a low carb diet approach, and the picture on the right was like a year later. And sure enough, as soon as I got the weight down, the snoring went away, the headaches went away. I had more energy, kind of like I used to. Again, we all want more energy like we used to have. But at 46, I was like, wow, I'm so exhausted all the time. But I felt like I had the energy I had 10, 15, 20 years prior. So I was really excited about that. Let's see here. So we'll get into keto and intermittent fasting, but let's imagine a new drug is being developed, right? This drug causes weight gain, obesity, increases your likelihood of heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, amputation. This drug would give you something called fatty liver, which may develop to cirrhosis. This drug elevates your cholesterol, elevates your triglycerides, causes inflammation in your body, causes a lot more pain, and increases your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Who wants, I'll get a prescription for you at the end of the, anybody want that? Right, I don't think so. Malpractice, right? You guys would be calling the medical board if I did that. Side effects, again, increase of this drug. There's more side effects, it gets worse. Sleep apnea, fatigue, increases risk for cancer, shortens your life expectancy. All right, anyone know what this drug is? Sugar, exactly. And these are really substances that I was thinking about that people are willing to die for, right? People are willing to die for tobacco. We're willing to die for heroin and opiates and I think amphetamines and alcohol, and sugar is the other thing we're willing to exchange quality years for, unfortunately. History of sugar started in New Guinea, 8000 BC. It reached Spain around 715 AD. And eventually made its way through the Americas. It's the largest producer of sugarcane is Brazil, and then India, China, Pakistan, Thailand, and Mexico. And it represents 80% of the worldwide sugar production. Sugar beet is also another source of granulated sugar. These are other names for sugar as well. So you're looking at the label, you don't see the word sugar, you're like, oh, okay, this must be fine. But, fructose, fruit juice, rice syrup, obviously table sugar, maltose, malt syrup, maltodextrin is a common one. So again, we have to familiarize ourselves. You don't have to memorize all of these, but pay attention to it and realize that just because you look at the label, it doesn't have the word sugar, doesn't mean there's no sugar in it. If it tastes good and it's sweet, there's probably sugar in it, right? Again, what nature made difficult for us to get, man has made it easy. In nature, sugar is available in the form of fruit, right? And does anyone have a garden or plant or have trees or whatever? And if you're eating the fruit that you grew in your backyard, how often would you eat fruit? Once a year, but your fruit trees don't give you fruit all year round, right? Maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months. So we would get sugar 2 to 3 months a year. If you were only eating the fruit that you were growing, you would get fruit 2 to 3 months a year, and then you would have to wait 9 to 10 months to eat fruit again. right? So we really were never probably intended to have fruit all year round. The only reason we have it year round is because we import it, and we can. So basically, and then sugar also comes in the form of honey, which is protected by bees. So again, sugar was not as ubiquitous to our ancestors as it is today. This is just about eating seasonally. These are the fruits and different seasons at which they approve. I'm going to kind of go through those. Some of these I'm going to go through quickly. Here's sugar consumption in the United States. If we go back a couple hundred years ago, it was about 5 pounds of sugar per year. Now this is only about 2000, so I imagine we're probably up here somewhere, about 120 pounds of sugar per year, per person, right? Per person. And then we wonder why healthcare is having so much dementia, so much diabetes. We need more affordable insulin. Yeah, that's important, but it would be better if we didn't need insulin. Obviously, for type 1 diabetics, they don't have an option. But for type 2 diabetics, really the solution would be to not need insulin to begin with. So this condition was called insulin resistance. So a lot of us, because we eat so much sugar, when we eat sugar, our body does one of three things. We either burn it, we store it as glycogen, which is a sugar storage molecule that is in our liver and in our muscles. And we can only store about 2,000 calories of glycogen, right? And then once we've stored more than 2,000 calories of glycogen, our body will take that extra sugar and store it as fat. And that's really what it comes down to. But for this to happen, our body has to secrete insulin. So our pancreas has to secrete insulin every time we eat a sugary meal. And if you know anybody, or perhaps somebody here has been on insulin, or you might know someone who's on insulin, I'm talking about type 2 diabetic. When they start insulin, they usually go up about 10 pounds, okay? Because insulin is a fat-promoting hormone. Likewise, when we eat sugar, we're literally secreting a hormone that is telling our body, store fat, store fat, store fat. So again, we eat sugar, sugar causes the insulin to spike, insulin tells our body to store that fat as sugar. Store that sugar as fat. And when we have elevated insulin levels, this is what it can do, right? It increases your risk for Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, fatty liver, kind of the things that we talked about, cancers and so on. You may have seen, skin tags. Anyone have skin tags? I have some. Skin tags are a sign of prediabetes. And if you see those sometimes on people's necks, they try to scrub it off. Again, it's a sign of prediabetes. It's called acanthosis nigricans on the left side. And these are skin tags, right? We get them in our armpits, get them in the groin. These are all signs of prediabetes. So people might get these in their 20s, but yet not be diagnosed with diabetes till they're 40 or 50. So there was warning signs decades before that there was insulin resistance, which leads to prediabetes, which ultimately leads to diabetes. It's on a spectrum. You don't just happen to become diabetic one day and healthy the prior. These are just different forms of sugar. I'm going to kind of go through these here. Again, we have carbohydrates. We have simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates are what we call polysaccharides, poly meaning many, many sugars. And those are in the form of starches, fibers, and glycogen. Simple carbohydrates include mono. Mono means one, di means two. So again, glucose, fructose, and galactose, which is in milk, are monosaccharides. And then disaccharides, again, lactose also in milk. Maltose, lactose, and sucrose are the disaccharides. So rice, let's take rice for example. Let's pretend this was rice, or it could be a grain as well, right? So white rice, for example, does not exist in nature. White bread doesn't exist in nature, right? It starts off as a whole grain, right? And then what they do is the processing process, they take off the outer layer, the fiber layer, the fiber-rich outer layer, which has B vitamins and trace minerals. And inside of it is where the sugar is. So if you're eating a brown rice, for example, the sugar gets absorbed slowly because your body has to break through this fiber. And so you eat the brown rice, and little by little, the outer layer is getting released. It's kind of like an extended release medication where you take it and it kind of lasts the whole day. White bread, white rice, and so on, pasta, it's like an immediate release, medication where all of a sudden, as soon as you eat it, it gets absorbed quickly. So rice is kind of like an immediate release sugar capsule, and brown rice is an extended release sugar capsule. How much sugar is in our blood? So I'm 6'3", 207 pounds. I have about 5, maybe 6 liters of blood in my body. If we took all the blood, so Dr. Ching comes up here, he puts a needle in my arm, takes all the blood out of my body. So here we have, 5 liters of blood. And we pull out all the sugar out of that blood. Any guess how many teaspoons of sugar is in all the blood in my whole body? Any guesses? And I'm not diabetic. 5 teaspoons. Anyone else? 2? The answer is 1. That's it, 1. Right? But then we start off our day with just 2, 3 teaspoons of sugar in our coffee. So now we only have 1 circulating in our blood, and our body has to process the other sugar that we're eating one way or the other. 4 grams are in 1 teaspoon of sugar. So I'm gonna, again, our body stores sugar one of 3 ways, or does one of 3 things. We either burn it, we store it as glycogen, or we store it as fat. Fat storage. So 1 pound of fat is 454 grams. 1 pound, there's a lot of science here, but 1 gram of fat provides 9 calories. Basically, 10 pounds of fat contains 40,000 calories of energy. 40,000 calories. Like most of us on a day-to-day basis only burn maybe 2,000 calories with our, maybe 2,500, depends on how active we are. But most of our calories we burn just we're breathing, our heart is beating, we're moving around, and so on. But, we have 40,000, 10 pounds of fat has 40,000 calories. If we walk 1 mile, we'll burn about 100 calories. All right, so if we walked from Murrieta, or Hemet for that, do you guys know where Cupertino is? Right? Headquarters of? Apple, right? So it's 422 miles from Murrieta. If we walked from here to Cupertino and didn't eat anything at all, we would utilize about 12 pounds of fat. Right? And it would take us, by the way, 140 hours or 6 days. And that's all you would lose would be 12 pounds of fat. So imagine you want to lose 20, 30, 40 pounds. I mean, you literally have to not eat for a week and walk to Central California. And then, of course, when you get there, you'd be starving and you'd probably eat a whole bunch of stuff. So in other words, exercise is important, but it's not a good way to lose. It's not the best way to lose weight, right? When I first started this journey 4 years ago, and I lost 30 pounds in 90 days, I did not exercise. Right? I was walking, but I was walking beforehand as well, so I didn't do anything different. I simply reduced the amount of food that I took in. These are obesity trends in the United States. So we go back to 1990. If you notice, no state, maybe blue. So at the most in 1990, maybe 10 or 15% of any state, maybe 20% of any state had obese people, which is defined as a body mass index above 35. By 2000, some states had 25% of the people were obese. By 2010, many states had greater than 30%, greater than 1 in 3 people were at a BMI over 30, in just literally 20 years. Basically, it's projected by 2030, 50% of America, and probably the rest of the world actually, will have a BMI above 30. Right? Obviously, which brings a lot of problems, right? A lot of potential issues coming on here. We know that obesity is a risk factor for heart attack, stroke, and of course, diabetes. And if you're in your 40s, 50s or so, you're more likely to end up on disability earlier, right? So while Medicare is trying to push the retirement age to 67, potentially you might have half the people who are at 55 are like, I can't work anymore. I need the taxpayers now help. So now Medicare will, people will be asking for Medicare disability by age 55 or 60, which is really going to put a strain on the system in general because these people really should be working. So really, is the problem insulin resistance or obesity? And I would say probably both, actually, because again, not everybody who's obese has high cholesterol, has high blood sugar, is pre-diabetic. When they do the studies, 20% of obese adults, meaning a BMI above 30, are metabolically healthy, meaning they don't have a fatty liver, they're not diabetic, they don't have insulin resistance. They simply are overweight or obese. However, skinny people as well. So 40% of thin people are metabolically unhealthy. So you give me 100 people whose BMI is 24, normal weight, and we do blood tests, you're going to see fatty liver, you're going to see high triglycerides, you're going to see insulin resistance, things that actually make them at higher risk also for diabetes and heart disease. So it's not always just about the weight as well. Again, we talked about these. These are all side effects of insulin resistance, right? Which are pretty much the same a lot of times with obesity. So elevated blood insulin, prediabetes, fatty liver, gout as well. Uric acid is actually a metabolite of fructose, i.e. high fructose corn syrup. So if anybody here has gout, you might want to also watch your fructose intake or high fructose corn syrup intake. Diabetes, acne, polycystic ovary disease, hair thinning, and so on are all kind of related to this. Cancers as well are a risk factor. Sleep disorder, depressions. Depression is common too, right? I mean, when you think about it, and a lot of times I'll give this example to my patients as well when it comes to food. If you had a Ferrari and gas prices are really expensive, so you decide maybe just to put 50% of the fuel, 87 octane, and the other half water, your Ferrari's not going to run very well. Well, probably won't run at all, right? So you go to the dealer like, hey, what's wrong? This is a $200,000 car. Why isn't my Ferrari running? Well, what kind of fuel are you putting in your car? Why does it matter? This is a great machine. It should run irregardless. It should run amazingly no matter what fuel we put in it, right? And we do that with ourselves as well. We're depressed, we're anxious, we're have these health problems, we can't sleep, but then the question is, what fuel are we putting into our body? So obviously, when you use that analogy, it's very important. It's almost impossible to put junk food, sugar, and a whole bunch of toxins into our body and expect to feel like, we did when we were 20 years old, right? When we're young, our body can obviously take a lot of insults and, we can get away with a lot of that stuff. But at some point, right, it catches up with everybody. So cost to healthcare, again, U.S. medical costs related to obesity are estimated to be $147 to $210 billion. In California alone, a 5% reduction in BMI could save $80 billion in California alone. So let's go over some of the dietary myths. Number one, we should all eat 3 meals per day. We've all heard that. Right? Do you guys know where that started? On the farm. What farm? Kind of. That was a marketing slogan by Kellogg's in Good Housekeeping magazine back in the, I think, late 1800s, early 1900s, because people didn't normally eat breakfast back then, and this guy, I think it was Harvey Kellogg, had something to sell, cornflakes. So he had to convince people, hey, you guys need to eat breakfast. It's the most important meal of the day. It was a great, and again, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, is about as, scientifically accurate as, what is it, Pepsi, the new what is it? What's the next generation, Pepsi? Or Coke is the real thing? I mean, those are just slogans, right? So we do not need to eat 3 meals per day. Or we don't need to eat breakfast either, for that matter. I mean, you can, but you don't have to. Don't feel guilty. I have a lot of patients who say, I eat breakfast every morning. Are you hungry? Well, no, but I eat it because I've been told I'm supposed to. I'm like, who told you that? Well, I don't know. That's what my mom said. That's what my grandma said. We've been told skipping meals is bad. Low-fat diet is advised to lose fat, right? I mean, even as doctors, we tell patients, hey, go on a low-fat diet. Well, as a society, we've consumed more low-fat food since the 1980s, when the low-fat craze started, than we ever have. And that hasn't worked out so well. We're the fattest we've ever been, despite eating low-fat. Because when you go low-fat, you're eating more carbohydrates, which your body turns into sugar and ultimately fat. Or we say, eat all the food on your plate. So if you think about it, a baby or your grandkids, perhaps, when they're done eating, like, even a 1-year-old, when they're done eating, taking their bottle, what do? When they're done drinking their bottle, what do? Oh yeah, or they stop. Even if it's not empty, they stop, right? We don't sit there and say, hey, you still have 2 ounces. Open up that mouth, and squeeze the milk in your, we're starving, there's a baby shortage formula. Get this in there, right? We don't do that. Right? So the baby intuitively knows when it's full to stop eating, right? And then when we're young, we know to stop eating, right? But then depending on our parents or grandparents, what generation they were from, you don't want to waste food. They grew up in the Depression era, right? So we would train our kids, hey, I know you're full. I know you don't want to eat anymore. I know your body's telling you to stop eating because you probably have enough energy. But you need to eat all that food because there's starving kids around the world, so they make us feel bad. And then what we're going to do to reward you for overeating, we're going to give you a dessert, right? So we literally are like rewarding kids to overeat. So now they develop these horrible habits, and they're eating beyond satiety, and then they're rewarding themselves for doing so. And the end result is, again, we see it. We're going to talk a little bit now. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Oh, these are some of the books, by the way, too, that I've read over the last few years to kind of get me to this point where I'm at today. So let's talk about fasting, right? Because this plays a role. Fasting is the willing abstinence or reduction from some or all food, drink, or both for a period of time. An absolute fast or dry fasting is normally defined as abstinence from all food and liquid for a defined period. Fasting is part of human nature, human history. We've all fasted, right? Our ancestors didn't have fast food joints, and I'm talking hundreds of years ago, right? If we were just literally eating off the land, we would have been spending all morning trying to get some food for lunch today, right? And then depending on what was going on, what's in season, what's not in season, how we did hunting this weekend, we might have food that's good for a few days, or we might have hardly any food for the next week. So humans are used to fasting, are used to skipping meals, are used to going a day or two without a meal. We're always in either a feast or a famine state. Nowadays we're just in a feast state every single day. And then when we don't eat, or when we fast, we think, we kind of equate fast and famine almost. So eating irregularly is actually pretty normal. Starvation is obviously a whole different thing. No one's going to die here if you don't eat lunch or dinner tonight. Promise. We have different types of fasting, so intermittent fasting. So we're just going to kind of hit on the ones up here primarily. So we have what's called a 12-12, 16-8, 18-6. And what all this means is really the first number is how many hours you're fasting. So a 12-12 is basically you're not eating for 12 hours. That's it. You're sleeping for 8 of those. So that means you just don't eat for 3 hours before you go to bed. You don't eat within the first hour of waking up, and you've accomplished a 12-hour fast. Right? The word breakfast, right, is break the fast. 16-8. So this is where you're fasting for a 16-hour period and eating your meals in an 8-hour window. So you might eat maybe have breakfast or a brunch at 10 o'clock, and you have dinner at 6 o'clock, and that's it. You're fasting. Now, of course, you can have water, unsweetened tea during the fasting time. 18-6, 24 is where you eat your meals within a 4-hour window, and then 23-1 is just where or 23:1 is where you just eat one meal a day, basically. Hippocrates said, everyone has a physician inside him or her. We just have to help it in its work. The natural healing force within each one of us is the greatest force in getting well. Our food should be our medicine should be our food. But to eat when you are sick is to feed your sickness, right? And we've seen this with ourselves. We've seen it with our animals. If we have a dog, a cat, horse, whatever, when they're sick, they don't eat, right? And when we're sick, we don't eat as well. So, of course, we need to stay hydrated, but we don't need to eat. Again, remember, 10 pounds is 40,000 calories. So if you have at least 10 pounds of fat on you, we could literally probably go a month, if not more, without eating and not die of starvation. Plutarch said, instead of using medicine, rather fast the day. He didn't say fast 40 days. He didn't say fast a year. He just said fast a day, right? 24 hours. Fasting is done definitely by, in times of illness, for health purposes. So again, when we're not eating food, our body's not secreting insulin, right? So when we have insulin resistance, it's because we're secreting too much insulin. So the best way to fight insulin resistance is to fast. Even if you skip one meal, then your body doesn't have to release insulin. But if you're eating every 2 to 3 hours, your body's releasing insulin every 2 to 3 hours. And again, fasting is also done for weight loss or for spiritual and even religious reasons. Fasting in antiquity, again, Hippocrates and Plato both discuss fasting in their ancient Greek writings. Paracelsus, a Swiss physician, stated fasting is the greatest remedy within, or is the greatest remedy, the physician within. Famous people, I guess, we can use the word famous loosely, are Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Gandhi, and many more. So it kind of crosses all spiritual traditions. Fasting may help increase lifespan, according to studies, and this occurs by activating certain genes, which actually slow down the aging process. And they found these studies early on with fruit flies. They found when they gave fruit flies less food, that they actually lived longer than the fruit flies who were able to eat ad lib, or as they desired. So benefits of fasting, again, reduced insulin, increased insulin sensitivity, reduction in cholesterol, reduction in inflammation, reduction in blood pressure, more mitochondria, which we don't have the time to go into this, but mitochondria are the energy sources of your body. They're your batteries, basically. So when you fast, you actually create more batteries, internal batteries for your cells. And that's where we get our energy from. Growth hormone goes up. Fasting increases something called BDNF. BDNF is called brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's a hormone that helps our brain to make new connections. So it's important for helping to create new memory. So it can help theoretically improve, prevent Alzheimer's and improve memory. And it also improves the gut bacteria as well when we fast. Because when we feed ourselves, we're not really just feeding ourselves, we're feeding our gut bacteria as well, right? Because if you think about it, when we eat greens or lettuce or kale, we don't absorb any of that, right? So you're not really eating lettuce for yourself, you're eating it for your gut bacteria because it's a high fiber food, and then it actually encourages the growth of healthy bacteria, which provide a lot of health benefits to us as the human organism. This was my wife, still is my wife. This was us in 2018. That's when I turned 46. And we looked at those pictures and we're like, what the heck is going on? And then this was a few years later. Okay, so there's something called autophagy, which a gentleman won the Nobel Prize for back in 2016. So autophagy is your body's way to cleanse itself, right? It's the biological process that removes toxins and removes recycled components. So again, when you're fasting, your body has to be resourceful, right? So your body will basically, when you limit the amount of food that's being taken in, your body wants to make new DNA, wants to make new proteins, and you're not eating because you fasted. It only takes about 12 to 14 hours, I think it is, for autophagy to kick in. So if you're fasting one day for 18 hours, your body wants to make proteins and wants to make DNA, and because you're not eating, your body says, where are we going to get these from? So the body starts to scavenge the weaker cells in the body. Those might be cancer cells, those might be inflammatory cells, those are damaged cells, older cells, senescent cells. And the body says, hey, look, these cells are old and weak, in this part of the organ, we need protein. Let's destroy these cells and let's take these proteins and these amino acids and recycle them to make new parts. And I kind of think of it as kind of if you have a car that breaks down, right? And if your car breaks down and you're in the parking lot of AutoZone, chances are you could just go in there, get a new piece, fix it, and all is good, right? But if your car breaks down and you're near a junkyard and there's no AutoZone for 200 miles, you're going to be really resourceful. You're going to go into that junkyard and you're going to use up the old and half-damaged parts to build something new. The end result is the junkyard has a little bit less junk, and that's kind of what happens in the body with autophagy. Again, when we fast, a metabolic switch occurs. Glycogen, which is our sugar storage in the liver, is used for energy. This usually begins after 12 hours. And then after we burn through those 2,000 calories, fat tissue breaks down, and then our body starts to use fat for energy. And I'm going to go into the keto diet. Humans are hybrids in a way. Here, let me get past this. Fasting actually increases human growth hormone. All right, I'll go into a couple case studies too. I had a patient, 70-year-old patient. He's diabetic, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, 280 pounds. Hemoglobin A1C was 11, 85 units a day of insulin. He started intermittent fasting in a keto diet. Intermittent fasting in OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. Within a few weeks, he was off his insulin, down 15 pounds. 5 months later, still kept the 65 pounds off, and is still feeling great years later. This is like 3-4 years ago. So one of the things I frequently will tell my patients too is humans are like hybrid cars, right? In a sense that imagine you had a hybrid car that burned both gas and electricity, but the only time it would use the electricity is when you ran out of gas. Okay, so it starts off with gas, you empty the tank, now it goes to the electricity. However, despite only driving 10 to 15 miles a day, you go to the gas station every day and you keep filling up your car with gas or eating sugar, right? You keep filling up your car with gas, and at the end of the month, you look and you're like, I did not use any electricity or fat all month. Why is that? Well, the reason is because we kept filling up our energy source with sugar all day long. So we never got to that point where we're going to be burning fat, right? You might not be storing as much fat and stuff, but we're not going to be burning the fat and really until we eliminate a lot of the sugar that is in our diet. Okay, ketogenic diet. So, because I think that's what most of you guys were kind of here for. So, a ketogenic diet. Now, I've been, for the most part, doing this for 4 years, so it's not. So it's basically a high fat, and there's different variations to this too, so I have to make that clear as well. But keto can have poor food choices and it can have better food choices or healthier food choices. So we'll kind of discuss the difference. But a ketogenic diet, by definition, everything that we eat is either a fat, a protein, or a carb, and that's it. Everything that you eat is a fat, protein, or a carb. So it's high fat, high healthy fats, okay? So avocados, avocado oil, nuts and seeds, and coconut oil. Okay, it's not a pound of bacon per se. Although that can be keto, that's not what I'm recommending. Moderate protein and low carb. And these are some of the other diets out there. The main purpose of it, again, is that 80% of the calories are fat. So not 80% of your diet is fat, 80% of the calories. So a great example is you can have a big salad, right, with tomatoes and cucumbers and that's very low in calories, right? But you put a couple teaspoons of salad dressing on there, ranch or oil and vinegar, and that's 400 calories of fat. So your salad might have been 100 calories with all the vegetables, but yet the salad dressing is 300 calories of fat. So in reality, that meal was 75% fat. You got it? So some people think 80% of your food has to be fat, and it's the actual calories. 20 to 35% protein and 5% of carbohydrates. The keto diet usually recommends keeping your grams to maybe less than 50, 40, you can kind of go in different places, but usually it's going to be less than 50 grams total, or 25 to 30 to 40 net carbs, and we'll kind of go into what that means. Origins of keto actually goes back to an English undertaker who wrote about the benefits of a high-fat, low-carb diet in the 1860s, William Banting. His book was called A Letter on Corpulence. Also, about 100 years ago, we noticed that we can use it to prevent seizures. They noticed that when kids didn't eat for a while, they didn't have seizures, and when they would start eating, they would start having seizures again. And again, it's still used today for medication-resistant seizures because we've had so much success with medications. Most people don't have to necessarily rely on fasting or on keto for that. Let's see the biochemistry of it. Let's kind of go through that. There's what's called nutritional ketosis versus diabetic ketoacidosis. So most of us in medicine, Dr. Ching, you can agree, ketoacidosis is a scary thing, right? Because it's when a person's blood sugar is 1,000, their body's not making insulin, they're usually in the intensive care unit. They have IVs going in both arms. They're on an insulin drip, and and then as residents, even we're up all night in the ICU hoping that they make it through the night because they have acid in their blood. That's ketoacidosis. That's different than nutritional ketosis. But because of healthcare's close relationship with ketoacidosis, a lot of doctors are very skeptical about a ketogenic diet, especially when talking to a diabetic, because the word diabetes and ketosis just don't sound like a good combination because we've seen people die or possibly die because of this. But there's two different things. They're two different things, though. And by that, usually when somebody has ketoacidosis, their blood sugar, again, is above 400. I've seen it in the thousands. Insulin is deficient. They're severely dehydrated. Their ketone levels can be up to 12, and it's life-threatening. Whereas with nutritional ketosis, you're simply just cutting out carbs in your diet. Your blood sugar is normal. Your insulin levels are normal. It can occur in non-diabetics or diabetics. It occurs when fasting. You're normally hydrated. Your ketones usually don't go up above 2, and it's not life-threatening. Here's another patient that I had. He was 50-year-old at the time, had diabetes for over 10 years, was on insulin. He was using 130 units per day, also on metformin and glipizide. His hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker of how well one's diabetes is doing, the goal is to have it under 7.5. He went from 9.3 to 6.3 In 3 months, his triglycerides, or the fat in his blood, went from 665 to 417. He lost 25 pounds. He was only taking a pill, rarely. He was no longer requiring insulin. He was doing great for about 6 months. And then he went back to eating carbs. And then, sure enough, his insulin levels, he had to go back on his insulin. He gained the weight back and so on. And then he ended up leaving and going to another practice. But again, that happens, right? I mean, that sometimes does happen, but it can be done long-term as well. Again, keto is not really the Atkins diet. A lot of times people consider the Atkins diet a high-protein diet. There are a lot of similarities. Keto diet is not for pregnant ladies, breastfeeding, underweight. And then people with an eating disorder should probably just be careful when it comes to any kind of restrictive diet. Again, benefits of a keto: weight loss, improved diabetes, control or reverse diabetes, reverse fatty liver, helps out with heartburn. Improve mental clarity, may improve memory. They've done some tests where they found when patients with Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease go on a low-carb diet, they actually score better on memory tests as well. Because we've all had, big high-carb meals, and Ben Franklin said in Old Richard's Almanac, a full belly leads to a dull brain. And we've all been there when we've overeaten, too much pizza, too much chips, too much, cake or whatever. You're just kind of like, leave me alone. Kind of, your brain isn't as sharp. So the opposite is true as well. The brain will be more sharp. May help also with migraines, chronic fatigue, and MS, according to some studies. It reduces your fasting insulin levels, which is good. Reduces inflammation in the body, reduces BMI, increases the healthy cholesterol, reduces triglycerides. So these are all the things that we commonly see. However, this is what scares a lot of doctors, especially cardiologists. It increases LDL for about a quarter of the people. LDL is the bad cholesterol. Okay, so they tend to neglect all this other beneficial thing, right? You've lost weight, your insulin went down, inflammation went down, your good cholesterol went up, your triglycerides went down, and we focus on this LDL. But the problem is, it's not well, it's true, the LDL does go up. It's the LDLA which goes up. You have two types of LDL, A and B. B is the bad one. A is what we call large and fluffy. So the LDLA goes up, but this does not increase your risk for heart disease. Okay, but if we're just doing a regular lipid panel, we don't break it down. We just see LDL and it goes up. But if we were to actually break that down, we would realize that it was the non-atherogenic LDL that went up, not the bad LDL. Again, before the discovery of insulin, high-fat diet was one of the most common dietary treatments for diabetes, right? But then when insulin came on the scene and all these medications came on the scene, imagine, people with diabetes, imagine there was no insulin and no diabetic drugs, and all you had was diet, right? I mean, all of a sudden, you would really have no choice but to watch your diet. But because we have so many other options now, it's like, it's covered by my insurance. I can eat whatever I want. I'll just give myself more insulin or whatever. But prior to all these medications that we have, a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet was the way we treated diabetes. Again, what foods can you have? Non-starchy vegetables. So if the vegetables grow above the ground, they're non-starchy. Right? If they grow below the ground, so potatoes, carrots tend to have more sugar in them. But broccoli, cabbage, cucumber, kale, arugula, all these things above the ground are pretty much all fiber. And then low-sugar fruits as well. So avocados, tomatoes, right, which is actually a fruit, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, and so on. So these are low sugar fruits. Bananas, apples, and oranges are high sugar fruits. Again, if you're only eating a banana that grew on your banana tree in the backyard, you'd have bananas 2 months a year. That's it. And then you'd have to wait 9 months. So you could get sugar for a couple months a year, which is fine because we want you to put fat on your body before the winter comes. But then you would burn that sugar that was stored as fat during the cold months. And then by fats, again, nuts, seeds, almonds, Brazil nuts, cashews, pecans, coconut oil, chia seeds. This is how we get our healthy fats. MCT oil, I'm not going to go into this, but MCT oil, a lot of times people will put that in their coffee or put that in their food. That also can help because your body basically, when it consumes an MCT oil, it converts it to a ketone. Only about 10 more slides to go, guys. Again, meat is allowed on a ketogenic diet. What about saturated fats? We've heard a lot about saturated fats. Here was a study in 2015. Saturated fats are not associated with all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, stroke, or type 2 diabetes. So a lot of this is being called into question. Alternatives for milk, again, are going to be plain Greek yogurt, almond milk, coconut milk, hemp milk, flaxseed milk. Goat and sheep cheese are also a rich source of MCT, or medium chain triglycerides. Certain snacks that I've done over the years to make it easier, like Atkins bars, Quest has cookies, nuts, seeds, cheese sticks, low sugar fruits. Again, these are the kind of things that I will usually have with me at the office, so that if I'm hungry and want something to snack on, it will help me to get through the day. Alcohol. Everyone wants to know, is alcohol allowed, right? So yes, if you don't drink, don't start drinking. All right, don't be like, hey, I'm going to keto diet. Dr. Madrid said to start drinking. No, don't do it. So let's clarify what a serving is. 12 ounces of beer is one serving. 5 ounces of wine is a serving. So these are all pretty much equivalent, right? So one shot glass is the same as 5 ounces of wine, which is the same as 12 ounces of beer. So, you should limit it to, officially the limitation is for men no more than 2 drinks per day, and women it's 1, just because of the metabolism rate. And there's low carb beers out there as well. And even some of these alcohols have, if they're spiced, or if they're sweet, then they have sugar in it. So just kind of keep that in mind. Carb content of wine. So Pinot seems to be the lowest. And then we talked earlier about carb labels. So when you're looking at a label, here, there's 6 grams of carbs total, minus your fiber, carbs. So 6 minus 2 is 4, right? So this has 4 net carbs in this example here. All right, so it's because you don't absorb we don't absorb the fiber. So basically the effect on your blood sugar is 6 minus 2. So this is then they added 3, but basically 6 minus 2 is 4. So this was peanut butter. So 2 tablespoons of peanut butter has the equivalent of 4 grams of sugar, which is 1 teaspoon of sugar. Again, just another before and after. And again, I don't show that to brag, but basically to say, because I've had patients too who don't know me, and then they're like, oh, well, who've been new to me in the last couple of years, and here I am trying to talk to them about diet, and they're like, you know nothing about what it's like to struggle with weight. Look at you, you're normal weight. You've probably been like that your whole life. You have no idea. So that's why I show that, right? Because I was also very frustrated and had tried different things, and honestly, this was the thing that worked when nothing else did. So again, I don't show those pictures just to brag, but again, just to say, look, I know the struggle. The struggle's real. And again, to summarize, insulin resistance is really the first problem that we have, and we need to pay attention to what we're putting into our body, what's causing insulin. Consider intermittent fasting, and then consider a ketogenic diet. You don't have to do a ketogenic diet. That's just something that worked for me specifically. But I think if you look at any successful diet, even if it's a vegetarian diet or a Mediterranean diet or a paleo or a keto or whatever, they all have one thing in common. They avoid processed foods, sugars, and a lot of white rice and white breads and stuff like that, and juices and stuff like that. So I'm not saying keto is the only answer, because there's definitely a lot of answers out there. But really, at the end of this talk, if you can sit there and say, hey, maybe I can skip a meal once in a while, that has health benefits, and maybe I can skip some of these sugary foods or some of these things. And then maybe plan it out more too. So if you're like, hey, I'm gonna, go out to dinner, Cheesecake Factory, okay, on Sunday, well, that's when you have your cheesecake, right? But you can't have cheesecake Monday through Friday and have it on Sunday. And that's the problem. Most of us are having dessert every day or sugars every day. So if you save it for that special occasion, then it actually takes on a whole different significance. You're actually looking forward to it and use it more as a reward to having, followed the rules and been, having been disciplined throughout the week and stuff. So.